Hello and welcome to the Great Telco Debate 2020 and our first topic for this year's event, drawing on the CSP experiences of 2020, what will really change? Returning for the 7th outing of the annual Great Telco Debate are Chris Lewis and Graham Wild. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Lovely to be back.
Now, in a moment, we'll introduce our industry guests, our expert witnesses, who will give their views on the topic. And then we'll present our motion. And it's this motion that we want you to vote on, either for or against. And Chris and Graham will do some last-minute campaigning to support their views. Chris, what's the premise behind today's topic?
We usually start the Great Telco Debate with a more generic look at the industry, where it's sitting, how things are developing. But this year we thought, building upon what's happened with COVID and the way in which the industry has responded to it, we wanted to raise the question of how well it had done and how this had changed the telecom industry itself.
Thank you very much, Chris. Well, time now to introduce our industry guests, who will be providing their expert witness statements on the topic of drawing on the experience of 2020, what will really change. And I would like to welcome Jean-Yves, who is Director of the Board of Digicel and former Chief Executive, as well as the Chairman of LA-based digital media agency Shareability. Andrea Dona, Head of Networks UK for Vodafone. And Phil Mottram, Vice President, Communications and Media Solutions, Hewlett Packard Enterprise. Hello everybody and welcome to the Great Telco Debate 2020. Chris, over to you now to kick off proceedings.
Thank you very much, Guy, and great to be here, and great to have such a great lineup of guests to join us to discuss this topic of how the industry has reacted, behaved, and positioned itself based upon 2020, and obviously looking forward to the future. So if I might start with you, Jean-Yves, from your position with Digicel and the experience of working with that organisation across all the countries, geographies that you represent, how has it been for you, and what have you taken from the experience of 2020?
Thank you, Chris. I think, the big question for the industry is whether 2020 will be a year of a major crisis or whether it will fundamentally be a year that we seize a number of new opportunities. What we've seen certainly in emerging markets is a number of telcos retrench in 2020 due to the impact of lower revenues and hence focus on lowering costs, lowering their CapEx investments overall. But I think as an industry, we need to step back and fundamentally rethink whether this crisis could represent an opportunity. And I want to fundamentally reflect on that in the next few minutes, because I believe that this crisis could allow a number of telecom operators to fundamentally transform their business models and reinvent themselves. So the first opportunity that I see of this COVID crisis is really an opportunity to re-engage with customers. As we know, the telecom industry has not done well in the last decade or so with customers and with consumers. Our NPS scores, particularly in Europe, are now lower than that of the airline industry. And so we're lower quartile in terms of our engagement models. And it's clear now more than ever before that networks are going to be fundamental to the way that we work and we live due to this COVID crisis. We're going to see a greater move towards working from home. We're going to see greater demands on entertainment. We're going to see companies accelerate their models to digital and to the internet. And so I think that it gives the industry and the players that want to seize the opportunity to fundamentally rethink customer service and make it much more digital. The opportunity to accelerate the move from legacy backend systems to much more agile systems, the move towards data mining and the opportunity to personalize services much more. But also taking perhaps contrarian views on brick and mortar and whether or not we can reinvent experiences to be much more digital than ever. So I think that's the first opportunity, is fundamentally around re-engaging with customers. I think the second opportunity is that of the digitalization of our businesses. which I just touched upon. There's no doubt across the world that enterprises are having to accelerate the digitalization of their businesses. And so whilst re-engagement and digitalization go hand in hand, I think these are two fundamental opportunities. And the third is around taking perhaps a contrarian view to this COVID crisis. Should we be simply thinking about cutting costs and retrenching on investments? Or should we be thinking about taking a contrarian view and, in fact, accelerating investments, making networks more relevant than ever before, taking the opportunity to expand marketing spend, taking the opportunity to launch new products and new services? That is, in fact, the position that we've taken at Digicel. We've taken a view that this is an opportunity to basically launch a new series of services that we've called our Prime Bundles, along with 8 digital apps, and become ourselves much more of a digital operator. And so whilst we've all had to take a number of very tough measures, whether it's protecting our employees or ensuring that we could weather the storm as telecom operators, the thesis, I think, for reinventing this industry is stronger than ever before. And I think very strong leaders will emerge as a result of this COVID crisis, taking on these opportunities of re-engaging with customers, digitalizing the business, and fundamentally launching new services.
Thank you very much, Jean-Yves. Great to get the perspective, of course, from the very top of an organization, but also, as you said, from the emerging markets, where we really should always consider every type of market in which the industry engages. I'd now like to turn to Andrea from the Vodafone position. How do you see Vodafone and the industry learning and coming out of this 2020 situation?
So I think that what will really change as a result of our learnings in 2020 is a permanent reevaluation of the value that telcos bring to the economy and the consolidation of the pivotal role that connectivity will play broadly across society. Second, I think there'll be an intensified focus on the investment strategy and the return of that investment. Also, last but not least, an acceleration of the long-awaited cultural transformation of telcos and digital transformation of the businesses. So on the first point related to the value of the economy and society, without the work that Vodafone and other MNOs carried out during the pandemic, many more jobs and many more livelihoods would have been at risk. The blow was somewhat softened, but it was a hard one nonetheless. So we need to leverage the technology and the forced innovation and agility that has been introduced as a result of our situation to help the economy back on its feet and accelerate the lost ground, accelerate after we come out of whatever situation we come out from. Mobile and broadband connectivity provided the backbone to our response and the country's response to the pandemic. And telcos now, more than ever, are seen as a critical national infrastructure provider. As we entered that pandemic and as we found ourselves with massive overnight shifts in traffic patterns and consumer behavior, that has broadened the demand that has been placed on telcos. And therefore, when and where to invest become even more critical against a backdrop of continually moving traffic patterns and continually moving customer requirements. Already stretched budgets need to be stretched even further to accommodate this new additional demands. And finally, on the cultural and digital transformation, we're all having to embrace and acknowledge the importance of what we call in Vodafone an effortless and a contactless interaction with our customers. Without this, vital new revenue streams that will make up for the lost revenues in the past will not be truly tapped into.
Thank you very much, Andrea. I think very, very clearly, very passionate about the way this has changed the organisation and obviously given momentum to the Vodafone business. Phil, from an HPE point of view, How has the pandemic been for you?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think Hewlett Packard Enterprise is very much a people business. I mean, it's got a brilliant culture. People typically have worked for the company for a long time, and they love the company. So I think, the company has people at its heart. What it's really focused on is adapting to the new ways of working. And so we've kind of adopted a new profile of working called edge to office. So I guess historically people would largely be based in offices. And now what we recognize is people are more likely to be distributed out to the edge, which is typically their homes. And they'll only go into offices for kind of collaboration and those sorts of things going forward. So I think HP's definitely changed its approach with regard to ways of working for staff. As a people business, as you would expect, it's really focused as well on culture and mental health. I mean, I think for some people who get to spend more time with their families and maybe this new way of working gives them more flexibility, that's obviously a positive thing. But obviously you have people as well that live on their own, and that can be quite detrimental, being in a lockdown situation when you're living on your own with very little contact. So the company's really focused on that as well. And then in terms of how we're helping support customers, obviously this puts more pressure generally on the economy. That pressure will feed back into telcos. And what we're doing there is we're helping telcos with new services that they can roll out to customers to make more money, but also providing IT infrastructure under consumption-based models so they can link the costs of deploying new IT services to revenues coming in from customers. So that's how we're helping customers.
Many thanks indeed, Phil, for that. So having run through the initial statements from our witnesses, I'd now like to turn back and actually ask some additional questions. And perhaps if I might come to you, Jean-Yves, first. Thinking about it, you talk about this repositioning, this re-energizing of the telecom industry. At a board level, given all of the uncertainties that you face as organizations in different countries, how easy was that to get that through at a board level to say we really must seize this opportunity and push forward rather than retrenching, as you described for some other telcos in the region?
Look, I think that the COVID crisis is fundamentally reshaping a large number of industries around the world, as well as the way that consumers engage with their telecom operators and the way that they are working today or spending time from an entertainment point of view. So I think that it's very natural for boards to look at fundamentally these structural changes that we're witnessing. And these changes are not going to be just during the COVID crisis. I think boards have to realize that these changes are fundamentally profound. And hence they represent opportunity. So I don't think it's a complex debate to have at the boardroom level. I think what is much more complex is having clarity in the strategy to pursue in these times and being able to execute immensely fast in the implementation of these strategic initiatives. So I think those are fundamentally the key questions, not whether or not there's an opportunity to rethink fundamentally the strategic direction of a business at the boardroom level.
And if I might sort of pick up on that a little bit further. So you talked about the new bundles and the new services that you launched during COVID. How do you think the telecom industry is perceived, and how does it fit into that wider digital economy that you touched upon, where we're underpinning a lot of those other services, but we're obviously not responsible for those other services? So how does telecoms fit into that emerging digital ecosystem in your mind?
Well, I think, the consumers have voted with their feet fundamentally in considering that the telecom industry in most markets around the world is no more than a set of utilities, just like water or electricity. And hence why we've ended up in Europe or in the United States and elsewhere with NPS scores that are lower quartile. I think the analogy of looking at our NPS scores versus those of airlines is very relevant. I think it is upon the industry to fundamentally recreate value in the eyes of the customers. And I think the opportunity with COVID really exists, that we can be part of this wider digital ecosystem, whether that's providing a better digital experience rather than a brick and mortar experience, or whether that's providing services that are more relevant today than they might have been tomorrow. If the industry sticks to its knitting of only providing bandwidth, I think we'll continue being no more than a utility. What we've done at Digicel, for example, is that with our Prime bundles, we've included a whole bunch of entertainment propositions. We've included a bunch of apps. We've multiplied by X the number of gigabytes available so that customers can watch their favorite sports events, their favorite entertainment show on the go. And so I think that's fundamentally crucial to rethink that we can be part of a wider value proposition than simply a broadband proposition.
Many thanks indeed, Jean-Yves. Always great to get your perspective wherever you've been working in the industry, and we look forward to engaging with you further in the rest of the debate. Andrea, do you want to talk about some of the issues and the barriers that you overcame and how you overcame them within Vodafone?
Yeah, the immediate barrier we found ourselves overnight to deal with was the fact that we weren't physically present in the locations, in the test labs that we generally work in, where we test and introduce new technology. So the lack of being present in the switch sites, in the customer premise, in our laboratories and our test labs, to be able to introduce the latest features, the latest technology, was definitely a barrier we had to overcome. The other big barrier we had to overcome was remaining connected while we were physically apart. Keep the one team spirit going while we're all working independently from our homes. And that was a barrier that we had to overcome, ensuring that sense of one team, that sense of community, all working for one common purpose to serve our customers and to serve the nation during the pandemic, was another barrier that we had to overcome.
And what about the changes from the network point of view in terms of patterns of traffic consumption? Did that pose major problems for you?
Enormous problems, enormous challenges in trying to, first of all, ascertain where the traffic had moved to, what was driving that additional traffic in terms of a new application, whether it was a new location that we previously did not have a hotspot. And that all had to be analyzed and reacted upon overnight so as to ensure a smooth working of our network. We also saw that with the instruction by government to follow certain rules in terms of lockdown, we also had a massive uplift of uptake on our NHS contracts, for example, or our government contracts, where we had to react to sometimes as much as 400% increases in traffic levels as a result of more citizens accessing those services to figure out whether they were eligible to furlough, whether they were eligible for pickup of their medication remotely through the NHS, or whatever services that they wanted to tap into through those contracts that we have with the various government departments.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it must have been a fascinating, if not very stressful time. And Phil, from HPE's point of view, Andrea there talked about sort of the changing way in which the teams work together. What about the changing way in which you had to work with your telecoms customers? How was that impacted and how did you overcome that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think for some of our more forward-thinking telecoms customers, they want to work with our teams in an agile way on kind of CI/CD type developments. And we're dropping releases every month as part of ongoing programs with these kind of more forward-thinking customers. And by the way, I think all customers will get there at some point in the future. And so obviously that presents a bit of a challenge because typically our teams would have been co-located in the same locations, often with our customers making those developments. Or if not, we have big development centers in France, India, those sorts of places where we've literally got hundreds of thousands of people in our own teams building software. So there's quite a big change there around how do you continue to develop and maintain software products in an agile environment, but in a remote setting. And actually, we were quite surprised because I was a little bit concerned about whether the productivity would drop or not with people being at home versus sitting next to each other. Actually, the productivity improved slightly. So in the end, we managed to meet all the kind of delivery commitments that we had to customers, which was obviously quite a result. Because as I say, my natural suspicion initially was, oh, this could be a problem, but actually it wasn't in the end.
Did it result in any acceleration of those transformation programs that you're working on with the telcos?
I think for some customers, yeah. I mean, I think customers seem to kind of fall into two buckets, really. I think some of them were on the journey and then they just thought, right, actually, this is a great way to accelerate this journey now, but they're kind of a reasonable way along it. Whereas I think for other customers, if they weren't on the journey, it's quite a difficult time to embark on that digital transformation journey. So they kind of fell into two buckets, really.
Andrea, one sort of final question for you. What's the biggest lesson learned for Vodafone having gone through this exercise?
I think a complete return to the pre-COVID world is not an option. I think the biggest lessons learned is that the impossible, what seems to be impossible, is actually possible, and embracing the new dynamics at play, the new procedures that we've put in place, the new culture and attitude and mentality of getting exceptional stuff done overnight, and that becoming the norm is the biggest learning. Really accelerating digital transformation in terms of our processes, in terms of the way we do things, and also Phil talked about it earlier, and I completely agree with him when it comes to the attention that we need to place, the increased attention we need to place in the well-being of our staff, both mentally and physically, and the importance of putting our people at the heart of everything that we do, empowering them with the right tools, with the right environment for them to deliver the best. And we've seen that once we do that, even in exceptional circumstances like the ones that we've experienced in 2012, we get a massive return in their delivery, in their productivity, and a great result for our customers and society in general. So that extra focus, that extra attention in empowering and equipping our staff to doing the best they possibly can, even in very difficult and unprecedented circumstances.
Thank you, Andrea. And Phil, perhaps one final question for you. Was there any pattern you saw? You saw this. You mentioned this sort of two buckets of types of telcos. One accelerating their digitization, one perhaps a little reticent to move on that journey. Within the activity you had with those telcos, were there any particular areas of emphasis that they brought to the fore? Was it to do with digital channels? Was it due to cloudification? Any particular areas that you saw emphasis, or that patterns changed and you were asked to deal with it more quickly?
Yeah, I think, look, digital transformation in particular around customer service, I think that's been a big area of acceleration. And then I think the other area of acceleration that we've seen particularly in the last 6 months is in the edge space. And I think that's been driven by two things, really. One is telcos looking at the potential to drive incremental revenues and services from enterprise customers out at the edge, because I think that's going to generate the returns on the 5G investments that telcos are making. So that's on the telco side, but also increasingly you've obviously got the hyperscalers as well looking at the edge and how they're going to land their compute platforms at the edge for enterprise customers. So I think they're the two kind of, there's digital transformation, customer services accelerated a lot, but also edge enterprise as it relates to both telcos and also hyperscalers.
Which is a great lead into two of the latter debates that we have during the great telco debate this week. So thank you for that lead. And with that, I'd like to hand back to Guy.
Thank you, Chris. And as we've got a little bit of time, there's a couple of questions I wouldn't mind asking of our guests, if I could. Andrea, could I ask you this one first? And that is in your statement, you talked about how telcos are becoming more viewed as critical infrastructure providers, and this realization of the importance of telcos. Does that, learning lessons from 2020 and applying them moving forward, does that help you? Does it manifestly help you? Does it enable you to get more investment, to accelerate your rollout plans? Is there a benefit of being viewed as a critical infrastructure provider?
Absolutely, Guy. I said in my opening statement that I strongly believe in a permanent reevaluation of the value that telcos bring to the economy, and a consolidation of the pivotal role that connectivity and telcos bring to the broader society, to society in the broader sense of the term. And I think that permanent reevaluation only reinforces our case for investment. And as I said in my second point, as we are asked to do more, as we are asked to deliver even more critical services across a broader section of society, which must be delivered, we will get better support for our investment, but we also have to up our game in terms of our focus on the return of that investment. Because as we get asked to do more, we will need to be very careful in ensuring that as we do more, we get the commensurate return on those additional investments that we get. So I strongly believe that it really will help us in a lot of from a lot of points of views, including as you say in securing additional investment, because we are so front and center to the fabric of society and to the recovery of the economy.
Thank you, Andrea. And a quick question for Phil as well. Phil, you spoke about IT infrastructure provision being more consumption-based. HPE was promoting this model before the pandemic hit us. As a result of the last 9 months or so, is the demand for this accelerating?
Yeah, I mean, completely. And I'm not sure if that's necessarily driven by COVID. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I guess it is, because probably COVID puts more pressure on a lot of businesses with regard to costs and revenues, in particular some sectors. And if you are given the ability to be able to link cost with demand and usage, then obviously that's a great opportunity to take, isn't it, from a financial perspective? So yeah, as I say, HPE has been leading the kind of forefront of this part of the technology sector for probably 18 months with our GreenLake proposition. It was already very popular before the pandemic and the lockdowns, but yeah, it's really, really taking off now. So we're very pleased with the traction there.
Thank you, Phil. And thank you to all of our experts. Okay, you've been presented with the facts, and now we want you to participate. You may have your own questions for our witnesses. Well, send them in and we'll add them into the mix for our live show, which is on Tuesday, December the 8th at 4 p.m. UK time. And get ready to vote, because here comes our motion.
The motion is 2020 has been a pivotal year for the telecoms industry.
Well, that's our motion. 2020 has been a pivotal year for the telecoms industry. Chris and Graham have tossed the great telco debate commemorative coin to see who is going to speak for and against the motion. And Graham, I see that you have the honour of speaking first and presenting your views for the motion.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask you to vote in favour of this motion for three reasons. First of all, the telecoms industry has done exceptionally well in standing up new capabilities which were unexpected and unforeseen. And it's responded amazingly well to the demands placed on it by society as a whole and by governments. Secondly, with the change in working patterns, many more people have been working from home, and there's been a need to rejig capacity and put capacity in different places, away from city centres and into the suburbs, and the industry's coped remarkably well with that. And thirdly, it's accelerated programs that it was already undertaking, for example, increasing capacity on networks and increasing the reach of those networks. But the second thing is that COVID has actually forced the telecoms industry to change itself. And I think that's probably even more significant in the end. So programs for digitization and automation have been accelerated. In many cases, for example, retail stores were not open, and so taking orders digitally over the web has been a crucial way of gaining new customers and also retaining customers. So I think that the industry is transforming itself through COVID, and it's also underpinning the needs of society. So I urge you to vote for the motion.
Thank you, Graham. Compelling arguments there. So now it's Chris's turn to present his views against the motion.
Thanks, Guy, and thank you, Graham, for pointing out the way in which the industry has responded. I think, however, it's really important to put the telecom industry into this broader context of the economy and the broader context of the way in which digital players are behaving. Formerly, it was self-contained. We made our own rules. We decided what was going to happen. Increasingly now, the people consuming the services that Graham described are looking more at their devices, at the applications and the content which they're consuming. In fact, I would like to introduce a new acronym to the industry, that of POB, plain old broadband. This is what we need to support our services and support the way we live our personal and our business lives. The emphasis on telecoms is not, in my opinion, the answer, and the industry is failing to understand that it needs to find a new position, if you like, in the digital hierarchy and understand where the real value lies, where the real value is created. So delivering and serving that underlying plain old broadband service is actually where the industry needs to go. Very few, if any, have succeeded in moving into adjacent markets, whether that's around media, business services or content. Many of them have struggled to do so and indeed retrenched from them. So I encourage you to vote against the motion. In fact, emphasizing the issue that what COVID has done has taken us away from understanding some of the underlying trends which are really challenging the industry going forward.
Thank you, Chris. POB, that might just sway my vote here. We have our motion and we have our arguments for and against, but what do you think, our audience? Are you for and against? Have your views been influenced by any of our expert witnesses, or have Chris and Graham's last minute pleas changed your mind? Vote now. There are green and red buttons below this video, for and against. Just click the one that matches your choice. And next to that is an area for you to submit your questions for our live show as we continue the debate and then reveal the final motion results. Thank you to all our guests for taking part today. Very much appreciated. Don't forget, there will be 6 debates and 6 corresponding motions. Catch them all and then come and join us for our live end-of-year Great Telco debate. Goodbye for now.